Yes. So, Matthew chapter 24, verse 1. Jesus left the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, "You see all these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place. But the end is not yet, for nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated for all nations for my name's sake. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because of lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations. And then the end will come. Probably more than enough to chew on. Okay, we, as a reminder, Jesus had just done some, what do you want to call it, a monologue earlier about Jerusalem and how it treated the prophets. He also talked about to the elders and the Pharisees and those folks about how bad they actually were, how they misled people and were hypocrites and things like that. So he just finished through all that, and they were leaving the temple area where he had just talked to them. And his disciples came to point out the building of the temple. If we look at the parallel verses of Mark and Luke, they kind of follow this same thing. They were extolling how great the buildings are. They're like, "My, look how massive and impressive all this is." And so Jesus comes and responds to them with one of those "yeah, buts," "yeah, but." And he then makes this thing about there will not be left here one stone on another. So I guess you can call it a prophecy. A lot of commentators that I read call this a prophecy, and it's a short-term prophecy, I guess, because this was about 30 AD, 33, 36 AD that he spoke this, and Jerusalem temple buildings were destroyed in 70, right? So it. From one commentator, I found it kind of interesting. I don't know why I didn't really connect the dots of the practicality behind it, but it wasn't like the building was standing up and then they just dropped it straight down. It wasn't like that, but rather that the rocks and the boulders and stuff were actually thrown over the mountain, because it's up on a hill. So it was all thrown down into the valley is what they did. So it wasn't just a flattening this way, but rather taken up. And again, in the commentators that I was reading, it said you can actually look in that area and see those stones still laying down there with it. So, an interesting tidbit of information there. So we're starting to get into this prophetic stuff. In verse 3, it starts talking about as the subtitle here says, signs of the end of age. And I need to probably put in a huge disclaimer right here. A huge disclaimer, and that is, Howard does not like talking about end times. Of all the subject matter that we Christians do and talk about, this is one subject matter I absolutely do not like. To tell you the truth, the book of Revelation, I hate that book. And I wish it had never been put into the Bible. I know I'm probably talking blasphemy here, but I'm just saying that for me personally, I don't like talking about the end of the age. It's not that I'm like afraid of it. I guess for me, it feels like it's such a waste of time to be talking about something that we don't really know, we can't really control. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. It is what it is, right? And I don't ever, even in business meetings, I don't like talking about things that you can't control, and there's nothing you can do about it. So why are we talking about it, right? Spending any energy on it.
Because a quarter of the Bible is on prophecy.
I know, and that's why for me it is a challenge to go through this stuff, and it is important to go through it. But I will tell you, this is not like candy to me. This is more like eating vegetables. I know I have to, but I don't want to, you know, with it. So I'm just giving you that I don't know.
But we can take comfort.
I'm sorry?
We can take comfort
That,
in knowing God holds the future.
yep.
And that His prophecies will come fulfilled, and that we have Christ returning, and that
Yes.
we have an eternal inheritance with Him. So all these things can be, even though it may be challenging,
Right.
I think the more we understand of it, the more we'll like it.
Yeah. Do you think that the point of discussion of end of age is really part of the gospel? Do you think it's really part of evangelism? Here, I mean,
I think people, the average bear on the street that don't know the gospel also don't have the assurance of things to come.
yeah.
Or even assurance of an eternal inheritance with Christ. So, or heaven,
I'm sorry.
or being in heaven. So from that standpoint, yes, right?
Okay.
I mean, they just figure what you see is what you get, but there's more to it. What
Right.
you see in life is all you get.
Frank, you were going to say
I was
something?
going to say that the Pharisees, in the previous couple of weeks, y'all probably went over it, how they were saying, our fathers killed the prophets, and we would not have done it, and we do these shrines, and then we fix their tombs up and everything. But yet, while they saying all this, they plotting Jesus' death.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
even worse than the prophets,
Right.
But they went blind. But since Moses put the tabernacle up, and then later made a temple, that's where God met with them. They would meet God there. And Jesus is about to go to the cross, and after he goes to the cross, you don't have to go to the temple now to meet God. And they put so much emphasis on that temple, like he was saying, look how great it is. And Jesus is saying, it's going to be torn down.
Right.
And like the lady at the well, you're going to be able to worship him wherever. You don't have to go to Jerusalem or to the temple.
Yeah.
In a way, I think it's like to know that, hey, this temple's going to be
Yeah.
demolished.
Yeah, and to the point of, they thought the buildings were more than just the structures. They was their whole cultural foundation. It was when you look at that, you see Jerusalem, you see them, you see victory, you see power and strength, that kind of stuff. We would kind of do the same thing with our buildings today in some way. Our Pentagon, our White House, the Capitol building, the Statue of Liberty, I don't know, San Francisco's Bay Bridge, any of those iconic symbols that we rest our strength on that, see what we've done, when really we think about it, I mean, that wasn't we, in our generation, wasn't even our past generation, it was generations before. And we're kind of like resting on the laurels of their greatness, I guess, on it. And so they really just took it to themselves as, there's no way that, you know, our buildings could be thrown down. We're so powerful.
And the Jews, their idea of events were Messiah comes and then we're going to have peace and he's going to do all these good things and then the tribulation, the millennium coming. They just really didn't see the church age that we're in.
Right.
And so,
Well, and at this point, I think technically, Frank, we're not, at this point, they are not in the church age. I think the church age starts
right after
at the
Pentecost.
Pentecost. I
Right
think
after.
that's right.
But he's talking about all these bad things that's going to happen
That's
in the
going
church.
to happen,
And they
right.
say, well, when is this going to happen?
Right.
That's what they're asking.
And it's interesting that they say that in verse 3 is, tell us when will these things be, and what will be the sign. I mean, they always seem to be asking for a sign.
At the end of the world.
And honestly, I think that phrase, and maybe that's why I have such a hard time with the apocryphal type of stuff, is that we keep asking the same question. Yeah, I mean, all this research that we do, all the books and movies and seminars and stuff about end times.
Well, that's why he said,
So we just always are asking, when's it going to be? Can you give us more details? Can you give us the signs?
and that's the same during the time of Noah. That's what he said, it'd be the same way.
Right.
And Noah built that ark, took a while to do it, and then before God closed the door, he left it open for another 7 days. Anybody could walk up that plank.
Right.
But then after he closed the door, that was it. And so everybody will be saying, well, y'all you Christians keep talking about he's coming, but when is he going to come? And
Right.
then the Christians like say, hey, I have no idea now, and it might be, but one day, it'll be the day, he'll be right on time. And it'll happen.
Right, right.
And it's as Steve says, I mean, it is a promise
It is a promise,
to happen that, all the things that are here will not still be. It's interesting that Jesus' response to me, at least it is, in verse 4, isn't, well, let me tell you the signs, as directly, like, well, if you go down to the end of the street, you'll see a sign that says, right turn only. That's a sign for you, you need to follow that.
Yeah.
It wasn't that kind of thing. It's, he kind of keeps it, if you will, what do I want to call it? Generic. See that no one leads you astray. So, I remember all these things of preaching and people who have announced Jesus will come on December whatever, or state a date and a time, and then start laying out cases for why all these signs are this date and stuff. And you get.
But with all those other signs that are so generic, there are a few that sort of give you a pinpoint, like with Israel. They're going to be scattered for all these years, but when they come back together, I'm going to start drawing them together.
Right.
That's like a big sign, like in 48, when they became a nation again. And all this.
And
So there's certain little signs, but again, it's still not a sure sign like this is it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You just know you're getting closer.
Right. And there's a lot of people that will say that the 1948 Assembly of Jerusalem isn't biblical. It is not part of it because sacrifices haven't begun again. They haven't really done, the real formation of the spiritual Jerusalem that was once was. It's now a political organization. I'm not saying yes or no. I don't know.
But Newton told too, though, that the church could be taken out, and then now it can come right into being because they have all the stuff already put in place. It's closer now where they redone the Hefker and they have the dyes that they needed for the priests, and all that's in place now. So.
What they need to do is get the Arabs out of there, and you got it.
And, so it can happen. It can go quick with what they already have. So, anyway.
So Jesus warns about making sure that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ, and will lead many astray. From the commentaries that I've read, that happened quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Even back when Jesus was there.
Right,
so it's
exactly.
happening now. So that's something that's
Yep.
been happening.
And we'll state that in 6, he says, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. If you do any kind of studying of history, you've been hearing about wars and rumors of wars
Yeah. So
way before our modern day today. Way before World War I, there were conflict, and those were just the U.S. ones that we're talking about. Because believe it or not, there's the rest of the world that wars and fights against each other that are not related to us at all. That are out there.
Always been.
Always has been.
But then it does say, though, as time goes on, that it'll start increasing.
Yep.
And then knowledge, where it talks about knowledge will really increase and people be going to and fro. And when they look at history, it took hundreds and hundreds of years for certain things to make a big difference. And then all of a sudden, with space and with the computers, knowledge now is like, if people that really study it say it's just a few years, it keeps doubling and doubling.
Oh, yeah.
And so those are all signs that we're getting closer.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have that for hundreds and hundreds of years, and now in our lifetime, it's just every few years, you have to keep getting another computer or updating it because of all the information being shared everywhere. And
So
people
Frank,
flying, and look how fast we can fly now, so people are going everywhere,
So are you saying that if we didn't have computers, the Lord would not come back?
Well, I don't know, knowledge, how you apply how fast knowledge is, to see a difference, for it to make a difference would be, it'd be so much slower.
Maybe I should ask it this way, is it because we now have Facebook that the Lord's return is sooner? Because
Well, I know it says
It
about,
gives you a clue of how some of the things you read about in Revelation.
yeah, because it talks
Would take
about,
place.
would take place?
Yeah, but as far as like where the whole world observes certain events, when you could visualize how the whole world could watch real time, whereas it would have been a little harder to understand one of the ways that could take place, right?
Right.
Even 2 decades ago.
So
when it talks about someone having a child, how as you get closer to the due date, the pains start coming quicker and all that, and the way the events are shaping up, it's revving up all like,
Yeah.
So you start putting all that together. I know one guy just said every day you're another day closer. We're
That's
closer
probably
than we
the
were,
truest
the closer
statement.
we were yesterday.
That's right. That's the truest statement.
Yeah.
It's
See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place. It says in verse 6, but he puts an interesting phrase on the end of it, but the end is not yet. So these things that are happening are not the end times, right? But they are just the markers towards the end times. I find that interesting that he would put, but the end is not yet. That is not the end. And then 7, he says 4 nations. So I'm assuming he's just continuing on with the same thought. For nations will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, which I think is the same thing as wars and rumors of wars. At least that's the way I'm looking at that. And then there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. So again, as Howard the naysayer here kicks into gear, we've been having famines. If you think about it, we've had you had famines back in Egypt before Israel left. I mean, before Israel moved into Egypt, there were famines. That was the reason why they moved there. But we've been having famines ever since, and we've been having earthquakes.
Yeah.
So how does this help us to see the
I
end?
see here where it says divers places, where it says various places. I always heard them talk about in the end times you'll start seeing them, there's usually certain places where they're prevalent, but all of a sudden near the end they'll be happening in places that you're not expecting them to happen. But evidently this may not mean that.
Well, I don't,
It just says various.
but not pretend that I know what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, that's all. I don't need it.
But again, at the end on 8, it says, but I shouldn't say it that way. Sorry. In verse 8 it says, all these are but the beginning of birth pains. So again, not the
Yeah, it's all just giving you a clue
right,
that it's out there.
right, and that even though it may, even in my little pea brain mind think, these are not necessary prophecies, but these are just a statement of the way the world is.
Yes.
The world is, if you will, falling apart, will always be falling apart, will always go to decay. Even in science, pure science, the state of matter always goes to a decay state.
Ever since Genesis 3,
Yeah, yeah,
ever since the fall.
right. That everything goes to falling apart, if I can call it that, or decaying.
Yeah,
Everything goes to the least state.
Entropy.
Right, entropy, that's what I was looking for. And so, I don't think that we can take these statements and necessarily say these are prophecies, but rather just clarification of, or the description of the, of the times, of the ages. The things will get bad. I guess that's what, maybe I could paraphrase it that way. Things are going to get bad, folks. Then in 9, mine says, then they will deliver you up. I'm puzzled with the word they. All of a sudden now there's this they put in here. Do you guys have any idea who or what the they is?
Maybe it's the ones that don't believe, the ones that aren't believers in the Lord, your enemy,
I don't know.
which could be satanic powers also, but they indwell people.
Could it be the ones that are trying to mislead? That it refers back up into verse 4.
He just talked about, right.
Could that be, then those who were misleading you will deliver you up to tribulation? I don't know. I really am asking if that's the they there.
Because all those that are opposed to the gospel, they hated Jesus, and he said they're going to hate you, and it's not comforting for hearing that. They're going to deliver you up, and they're going to kill you.
Yeah, that's not a great recruitment speech here.
Really.
Let's all join Christendom here because
that sounds good to me.
exactly. Yeah.
He's just letting them know what's coming.
Yeah. And I guess it is comforting to know that when our faith is being hated upon or being pushed around, if I can call it that, that God already knew that was going to happen. It knows that that's what is. This is not a surprise to God, where we have to plead to God to say, God, don't you know that we're being tormented here? But rather, it's stated very clearly that that's going to happen.
And and sometimes when Jesus tells them some things too, sometimes he's talking about right now, and some of the things he's saying are things that's going to come down the road.
Right.
Like we read and stopped that time in the thing. He was talking about what's taking place with himself right now in their midst. And then he stopped because the next part of the scripture would have been something referring to way back, in the future. And so sometimes Jesus is saying some things that makes you wonder.
In verse 4, it talks about no one lead you astray. Many will come in my name, saying I'm Christ. These are false teachers.
Right, and so that's kind of what I was thinking. Maybe then the false teachers will deliver you up in verse 9. If I substituted the word they for the false teachers,
And put you to death. Yeah, they're going to put you to death in tribulation.
right?
And you'll be hated by all nations for his name's sake. So I think it's consistent
Yeah,
with what I think that conclusion would be consistent. Or you're going to be more and more persecuted for Christ's name, by
Yeah.
that same crowd.
I think so too. The word tribulation that's used here, at least in this reference, is not the same as what we have talked about before. Well, that people have talked about the Great Tribulation.
Right.
I think it's
Talk about the
it's
experience
troubles.
right there.
it's some of that type of tribulation,
Right.
but it's before the period of time.
Right. So I just,
These are all the birth pains.
right.
I'm gonna be right back.
Yeah, tribulation meaning troubles.
Troubles.
More than the event of
Yeah.
what that might be. Right, that specific time, right.
I guess when Hitler was gobbling up all the countries around, everybody thought this was the end.
Right.
Because that looked like that was, maybe he's the Antichrist. A lot of
Right.
thoughts probably floated around. Yeah.
Usually, the word tribulation is reserved to mean after the pact with Israel is signed, and that would be the middle of the tribulation, which would be the start of the Great Tribulation. But then there's some room for interpretation there, but that's usually how that term, that period of time is
Right.
reserved to mean.
Right.
So, that's kind of a traditional view.
Yeah. It's going to get really bad.
It's gonna get really
That
bad.
last 3.5 years.
And most people hold to, many people hold to the view that, the church will already be lifted out in the rapture, so we won't be here during that time.
That's what I believe too.
I mean, I do too, and even if we're wrong, it'll be okay.
And about how scientists tell us that the earth was to be a little bit one way or the other, how things would burn up or we'd be freezing.
Right.
And I think that's what the scriptures kind of say when everything starts happening during the Great Tribulation, that the earth will be wilding a little bit off of its course and stuff like that, as everything's happening. That hasn't happened in the past. Because it says it's going to be worse than it has ever been in the past. And so we can think of things in the past that have been bad. Well, it's still future, it's going to be worse. But for Israel, no, it's going to be.
So
But all through all the things, though, with the Christian, God always protected his flock, or his remnant.
Yeah, he's remnant.
So even if the Christians even if the church is taken out, there'll be people that'll respond to the 144,000 Jews will be saved. But God, he does kind of protect a lot of that's his own, in spite of all that's going on. So.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we can stop here. We're
Okay.
we're not gonna get much.
Because with Moses and all that, with the plague, look how all the Egyptians were being affected, but yet the ones that were doing what Moses told them, they were being spared in the midst of the plagues.
Yeah,
So I think he's going to do the same thing with the ones that are here during that time.
I think so. I do too.
All speculation. Yeah, all speculation.
I know. It drives this analytical person crazy. So, I want the reference manual. I want the detailed parts and pieces and stuff. So, and I'm not going to get it. That's what I've learned. I'm not going to get it. So,
And there's probably more. There's more pieces and parts for us to understand than maybe, in our setting, there hasn't been a tremendous emphasis in teaching. So that may be part of our ignorance.
Yeah.
Is by
Yeah.
some churches emphasize it maybe too much. That's
right
all
on
they
one
talk
end,
about.
right, and then there's the
And then there's those that, and there's a lot of churches that just never talk about end time,
right,
and that's not good either.
right. I mean, both those extremes are not.
They're not right.
Not right.
Because it's in the Bible.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we need to talk about it and teach it.
I have to eat my vegetables. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather just be drinking milkshakes.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right. So, what are you guys praying for?